Hello and welcome to The Promised Land, a show about Manchester United and part of the 90 Min podcast network. I'm Scott Saunders, joined as ever by Rob Blanchette as we look ahead to Manchester United against Wolves. Big game in the Premier League because Man United have been pretty awful recently, not picking up the results they need, but we're also edging towards transfer season. I think the way that United finish this campaign, they have 4 games left, might actually help dictate just how well they do in the transfer market this summer, which targets they can actually go for, which targets they can't. We'll be talking about a few potential targets today that aren't named Harry Kane. So, yes, we do Harry Kane a lot on this show. But, Rob, how are you doing?
Not bad, not bad. And yes, we are about to enter silly season, isn't it? I think at our end, the transfer goss and news and all of that is starting to flow because we're getting to the end of the season, but we have still got games left and very important games, all of that, isn't it? So Wolves, massive game for Manchester United, biggest game of the season, Scott. Like, if you lose this for
entering that realm, isn't it, really?
You lose this game, you still got 3 chances to get the 9 points that you really need. But it starts here, doesn't it? This Wolves game is huge. And it was quite interesting to see Lopetegui talk the last few days about kind of how the objectives have been achieved at Wolverhampton Wanderers and how they feel pretty good about themselves.
So they'll no doubt come to Old Trafford and play without pressure.
Quite relaxed.
And they've come to Old Trafford and got some results in the past as well. Every game with Wolves at Old Trafford, every game with Wolves in general seems to be a tight, awkward game that goes one way or another. So I'm imagining the same thing. We'll talk about the Wolves game later in the show, but we'll start with some potential transfer targets talk. Obviously, you see tons of names floated around. We all know United's preferences of position, where they need to strengthen. They want a centre-back, they want a centre midfielder, but top priority is a striker. We'll leave the striker agenda off the board today and go with some of the other positions. We'll talk defensive options, midfield options, and a little bit on the goalkeeping situation as well, because that is obviously still quite pertinent. But subscribe to our show wherever you get your pods. Watch us on YouTube as well. Tuesdays and Fridays we usually run. Head over to the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment for us, leave a 5-star review and a comment on any of those audio platforms, because it really helps. And you follow us on Twitter as well, @_Scott Saunders, @_Rob_B, and @PromiselandMU for the show. Rob, you did a tweet yesterday, which you've been pretty hot on the central defensive target that United should be targeting for a while now. A lot of these names that we're going to talk about, and this is how clubs work, right? A lot of the time clubs have the one very specific target, but if they will have backup options, they will have alternative options. That's why you see Liverpool getting linked with 20 central midfielders this summer, because they want 2 or 3 of them. So they have a number of different options. And Jurgen Klopp even confirmed that himself in a recent press conference, that if you don't get your first option, you can get your 3rd or 4th option. They probably will just do as good a job as long as your profiling is right. But we've talked about central defensive options quite frequently. We talked about Jurrien Timber, but yours is a Serie A winner, Rob.
He's a winner now, isn't it? It's done. So Napoli, champions of Italy, incredible season for them. I think you need to think about that project at Napoli and how they've done it over the last couple of years. You know, they went from a team who played like quite nice football when everyone kind of liked what they did and how they set up, to now being a team that are genuine winners, winning the Italian title. So the player I want to talk about, and this is where a lot of the smoke is going now in terms of central defensive targets, is of course Kim. And we've spoken about Kim in the past, but we never really dug into the detail a little bit. And the reason why we want to do that now and why I'm kind of talking about him more is that there is kind of much more kind of solid confirmations from Manchester United about where they're going with targets. So Kim's got a release clause. Kim has achieved so much in just the last 12 months. Like, he really has, what he's done, going there as Koulibaly's replacement, a player who's like almost a bit of a godhead out in Napoli, and taking that next step with the football club. And isn't that a classic example, Scott, where a new player comes in and people are not sure about him, and you go from being a really good team to champions with that player, and that player takes you over the top. It makes me think of someone like Alisson or Van Dijk at Liverpool, those players that just get you over the top that maybe people don't rate before they come to the team. So I look at Kim, I think Kim could be that player for Man United. I really do. The price range looks really good. The skill set is amazing. He can do so much. And you're just about to lose your club captain who's going to go out the door. We know this. Harry Maguire is done at Manchester United. So you're not trying to replace Harry Maguire. You're trying to replace Rafa Varane. Because the truth is that Varane is not going to play as many games next season. It's just the way he has to be to look after him. And you might need another starter next to Martinez. So I think Martinez and Kim, that's quite exciting.
For me, and I've said this on previous shows, I think given Rafa Varane is, he's only 29, right? 29, 30 years old. And obviously his injury record is patchy, and that's putting it very nicely. You cannot really rely on him being fit and available. They are much improved when he does play, but obviously he kind of pulls up and is out for a number of weeks at any given moment, it seems. Yeah. My preference would be for maybe a younger alternative, because there are genuine concerns here. I know United do have a lot of players around 22, 23, but they also have a lot of players who are 30, pushing 30 or around those areas. Mm-hmm. So my kind of take on this would be, can you find a player age 22-ish that can mix the minutes with Varane and learn from him and eventually succeed him longer term, rather than having somebody who comes in as a bona fide replacement for Varane while he's still there? Because ultimately, I think that's a transition that you should do over the course of a couple of years. But obviously, Kim has had a great season. We reported on 90min.com years ago now that Son Heung-min actually told Tottenham, or wanted Tottenham to sign him when he was at one of his previous clubs. Tottenham decided against it. Mm-hmm. And look how it's worked out. Totally. This is a player who has been highly rated for a number of years. He was a player that could have been picked up as a relative bargain a few years ago. And even now, you could probably argue with the season that he's had, is still a bargain in the market.
Massive bargain. And Napoli are gutted that release clause is in his contract. Absolutely gutted, because he is worth a lot more than that kind of 40 to 50 million pound bracket that now Manchester United would be able to trigger if they want him. So this is the thing. Like, I'm not saying that Kim would want to leave Napoli as it stands. Like, again, they'd probably want to have a pop at the Champions League next year as Italian champions or one thing or another. But if you could go get him for this release clause, I'm putting him in that bracket of like 80 to 100 million now, Scott. Like, if that's what he was on the open market, that's how good he is. So I know, again, a lot of people, might not watch Italian football, might not watch Napoli, might not watch him, might not know a lot about him. But I think when you look at his skill set, it's everything that you were missing. I kind of agree with what you're saying, that if you could go get your Saliba and someone that you can kind of build up and put with Varane, fine. My problem is that if Varane is not your automatic starter for, say, 50 games in the season because he gets injured, and we know that he does, you need someone who's big enough to do it. I'm not sure a kid can. So this is where a lot of this is needs must, but I think this is also about effective squad building, because you're right, you do need youth. Man United got quite a lot of decent youth around the squad and the setup, and players who will come back into the squad this year in different positions. We're not even spoken about someone like, say, Hannibal or someone like that this year. Will he come back? There are players like that. But I think when you look at Manchester United and the centre-back situation, I think you're moving away now from the Maguire, Lindelof options. You might keep Lindelof, and you need a primary centre-back. And that is someone who's in their mid-20s, who knows what they're doing, who can tackle, pass, run, head, lead, do all that stuff. Kim's skill set, Scott, is off the chart. He is probably the best centre-back in the world at the moment. I think he's up there with the top 5. People might say, well, Gvardiol or someone like this. But for a right-sided centre-back, I think United needs someone that's going to play 50 games next year in spite of Varane. That's the way it has to be. And then at least you've got the two to be able to rotate. And that would be very effective rotation, I think, with those two footballers. But Kim would be my starter. And I think that's the way I'm looking at this, is that I don't want a kid who would be second fiddle to Varane.
Would Rafa Varane be happy in that situation?
No, potentially not, but I don't think you could have that conversation with Rafa Varane and say, well, you don't get not injured though, do you? You're not always fit. This is the problem. So I think you can always put that. It's like Mateo Kovacic. It's the same kind of issue. not doubting the ability at all. The ability is there. And if you played 50, 60 games this season, you have incredible value. But I think with Varane, we do know 100% that at some point next season, he will break down. And he might break down for 2 weeks, 8 weeks, or 16 weeks. And any of those are not great. If you lose a player like that for a period of time, then you're going to struggle to be top four. And Man United next year, Scott, want a title challenge. So this is why I'm saying go and spend that money on someone like Kim, because you're never going to get a player like Kim at 45, 50 million ever again. No chance. You're going to have to play Maguire inflation on footballers to just get someone who's maybe half as good.
I think that release clause, is that right? Actually expires at some point during the summer
next year. Yeah, it's the way it would work is that Manchester United, if they do want Kim and want to activate it, it would have to be done very quickly. So there is an activation point. So that's normal. I think that's, again, a lot of contracts have that because it's more about also if the club want to move the player on so they can maybe do some quick business, but they don't want to move Kim on. Like, why would you want to move Kim on? He's way too good. But Manchester United could be able to step in here and, you know, in terms of marketability as well for, an Asian footballer who could come in as well, Manchester United having a huge Asian market. There's a lot of things here that make sense, but most important is the football fact. And that is that he's a top class centre-back who's just won this Serie A title. He's a massive part of their success. You get him for 45 million, that's cheaper than Fred. So go and do it. It's almost too cheap for me to sit here and debate it for myself. I'm like, you're not going to get a player at that value ever again. You know, you could go to Saliba route, but then you'd need 3 loans off the back of it and maybe come in when he's 23, 24. United have got time for this project, but not that long. You know, they want to be title challengers next season, especially if we'll have new owners.
Let's talk about that, actually, because obviously it's a long way off currently, but obviously United have scored 49 goals, the same amount as Leicester this season, and Leicester in a relegation fight.
Yes.
Is it as simple as that you do get your striker who bangs in 25 goals and then you're elevated, even if it's just the one signing? They'll make more than that, obviously, but could United push actually that much further on with just a goal scorer in the team, or do other things need to be addressed in your view? Because I'm looking at it, I'm thinking might be, especially if they finish outside the top 4, it might be a bit too much to ask. I've always thought year 3 was title challenges, you should be really pushing for it then. Is year 2 too soon, or is it fair?
I don't think it's too soon at all. I think if you do get top 4 this year, and let's be honest as well, right? Even if you don't get top 4 this year, we don't want to imagine that reality, but let's root it in a little bit more kind of cement as opposed to quicksand. So if Man United take what they've done this year, win a trophy, be in the top 4 most of the season, and they've done it with a bunch of kind of very strange footballers and that you can swap around and, you haven't really got the depth, then I think it's absolutely fair to say next year, if you have, say, another 200 to 250 million pound investment from ownership, whether that be Glazers or everyone else, doesn't really matter at the moment. If you've got that, then you can go to the next level. So Arsenal did it in 3 seasons, and their build was across that 3 seasons. We think about what they brought in and brought back and brought Saliba in this final year. So that's kind of the getting over the hump part. Manchester United, I don't think actually have that problem. Like, we moan about the first team all the time, but the talent is there. So add more talent, make it work more, make it mesh more, and win more points. And if Man United had a striker this season, Scott, they'll be title challengers. So that's the perverse thing about all of this. So I think that if you go get your centre-back, who is a top-class centre-back, could potentially be your Van Dijk. I think there's similar skill sets to what Van Dijk brought Liverpool in terms of control and reading of the game and not wasting energy, like being able to run things with metronomic ease. You go get that centre-back and then say you go get your goalkeeper. I know you'd be happy with that, Scott, but you go get a goalkeeper and so you get a striker in there. And then you go get a midfielder in the budget category that adds more than maybe their normal value. 4 players could take you very far with this squad. And then you could lose players as well that maybe hurt you when they play. I always say this, don't I? Like about Maguire and the McTominays and all this. The problem with them being at Manchester United is you don't want them at Manchester United. You don't want them in your team. So get rid of them and bring in players that can help you. Kim would definitely help Man United, I think, become title contenders.
You just mentioned midfielders. Let's move on. Now, we know, or we talk about Declan Rice quite a lot. The suggestions like West Ham have an option to trigger a year's extension to his deal.
Yeah.
West Ham have actually turned things around quite well and probably in a much stronger position now than they were 3 months ago to go about keeping him.
Yeah.
Especially if they win the Conference League as well. It might be a nice time for him to say goodbye, but at the same time, West Ham, they avoid that situation of having to sell him for a lower price, probably for another year.
Mm-hmm.
I think he would make a great fit in the United midfield. I think he's the right profile. But we both said here that we think United need 2 midfielders on previous podcasts. I think, I know you're high on Romeo Lavia, who is going to be, he could be relegated with Southampton even this weekend, I think Southampton are very much on the brink. But an alternative number 8 as well that we report. And like I say, there's a lot of players on these clubs' lists. So we're not saying these are just options, essentially. And we reported on 90min.com end of March, I think it was, of some potential interest in Mateo Kovacic from Chelsea, who is 28, 29 years old, experienced in the Premier League, been Chelsea captain a few times this season, doesn't score a ton of goals, but has all the kind of capabilities that a modern central midfielder needs. Those reports have resurfaced this week that United are interested in him potentially bringing him, because he'd be another player, 30, 40 million quid, 1 year left on his contract, could do a job for a few years. But again, I come back to the point on bringing down the age of the squad. Ultimately, that midfield area, Rob, isn't it? You got Casemiro, 31, Christian Eriksen, 30-ish, Bruno Fernandes, 28, 29, and then Fred, 30-ish. Scott McTominay could probably leave in the summer. So ultimately, you're going to need younger players in this area and more energy. But Kovacic, on a budget, good fix.
Not a bad fix. So, like, we did do a little bit of Kovacic in previous shows, and we talked about what his attributes are. You just said they're kind of 30 to 40 million pound bracket. So, is he that much better than, say, a Sabitzer that you might be able to get for 15 to 20? Now, different types of player, of course. And I think Kovacic is probably more rounded and grounded. He's probably much more on Premier League season what you need. If he's going to stand
on Sabitzer, by the way.
I think things with Sabitzer is we certainly haven't seen enough of what he's good at. And I think we might see some of the worries that maybe people from Bayern Munich had in the last 12 months with him and why he ended up going out on loan, especially with the manager that knows him. Like Nagelsmann knows him and still let him go. And, he's one of Nagelsmann's signings. If you can still get him for 10 to 15, it's got to take it. I'll take it, because what we're just saying here about swelling the squad, I agree with you that you need younger legs, but I think we're really overlooking that there's quite a lot of younger legs at the 18, 19-year-old bracket of Manchester United that are about to come through. So there are these players that are kind of almost in mothballs. Like, they're young, they're in the B team, they're playing for United, they're showing what they can do. And it's the same of the Garnacho thing last year. So people were saying, do you go buy a wide player? And I was saying at the time, you got Garnacho. Hold that for, do you know what I mean? So Garnacho, and I think Garnacho will have a major part in his last final few games now. He's fit, he's ready. So we try and see if he'll get back into the team. But you're saying about this about midfield, I will put Kobe Manu back on the table, because you could say about Kobe that, go put him on a loan for a year or two. Could he go and do that? I wouldn't do that. No, he's too good at them, like already approaching 18. To say, well, go play at Sunderland for a year like Ahmed. So Ahmed's gone to Sunderland, where he's had 2 years really out on loan, isn't he? And Ahmed's done brilliantly. And Ahmed is a young player, and Ahmed will be back in the squad this year. I'm sure he will be. He'll be on the tour in America, and United will get a really good look at him. And they might still decide to put him out again. I think if Sunderland do come up, then he might stay there for another year in the Premier League. But there will be this thing about getting Premier League minutes in some of these players. Do you either do it with yourself or you do it with another club? But I think when you look at Kobe Manu, is that he can fill those gaps that we're talking about already. We're talking about youth being there to be able to play. Hannibal will be coming back to Manchester United. There'll be that choice on him as well. Garnacho is still young. We've not really talked about him. There's a ton of really good youngsters around there. United have got a young goalkeeper who we're going to talk about soon, who you could bring back. There's going to be opportunity to make this squad younger. But Scott, it's important then, if you've got older players, that then you move them out. So you've got to have a balance of some players at 26. This is why I say Kim is a good choice at 26 years old. And then you look at someone like Kovacic and Sabitzer, they do add you value, but they're not going to win you a title on their own, are they? They're not those kind of pieces. Like I would say Kim is, but I wouldn't say Kovacic is. So I think Kovacic is underrated. I think he's done really well at Chelsea in the time he's been there, and maybe his stock has dipped a little bit. He's not exactly a sexy footballer, as you might call it in midfield.
Kovacic.
Yeah, Kovacic. I think he's
really?
Look, I'm surprised by that. I think a lot of people look at him and think he's quite standard. I don't think that.
I think he's slick. Look, I think he fits. If United don't get him, I think he goes to City. And I think he might go to City anyway.
Really?
Honestly,
do you reckon?
Honestly.
I think it depends what you think is value at the end of the day. And I'm going to say you, I mean everyone. Like 30 to 40 million is good. But if you're going to pay like 45 million for Kim and he is your starter centre-back now, and that's the way you go, if you could get someone Kovacic for that price, he's probably going to have to come in as the starter. You're going to have him starting in that midfield. So who moves? Like, I think this is the problem.
Eriksen.
For you, it's Eriksen. I don't think Kovacic is anywhere near as good on the ball as Eriksen. So I think you need a central midfielder who has that ball control. So it's not Eriksen, but it's not Kovacic.
Kovacic is that?
No, I think Kovacic.
I'm really shocked by that. I think he's a brilliant ball carrier. Honestly,
Kovacic is metronomic and can give you lots of really good things. But we've been talking about the kind of whole Frankie de Jong side of this debate, Scott, about true talent, like vision in the middle of the park. And yeah, Kovacic would work with someone in there, but I still think you need that player. You still need that player who can run the game from there and have that kind of outward flair as well. So both with ball carrying and ball progression. So Kovacic is good, but if he's that good, why are Chelsea letting him go, Scott? Like there is a balance here. So
Chelsea have a policy on contracts. This is the thing.
Yes, of course.
And they also have 45 players.
And they like to give him 1 8-year contracts.
There's a reason. There is a reason.
I think Ten Hag would love a Kovacic. Like, there's no doubt about it. I think if he's on the table and that's something you can do, then I think that's something that gets done. But again, it's not priority 1 or 2 or 3. Like, I think, again, it's always a sliding scale. And I think you need someone in that midfield in the same way that for me, Kim would be a kind of a championship piece. I think you need a championship piece in midfield as well. I don't think that's Kovacic. I think Kovacic is a fantastic squad piece, and I think he would start a lot of games. And then maybe you would look at Sabitzer and go, "We're not doing that deal because we've got Kovacic." Sorry about that, phone going off. But Kovacic, you'd look at, and I'd say, yeah, he's more than good enough for Man United. I think if you asked a lot of Man United fans, Scott, a lot would say no. I really do. I think if you talk to a lot of the wider base, they would go.
Rob, you ask me that in an ideal world, I'd say no. But we're not in an ideal world. I think this is like a deck of cards, essentially, or it really depends on what decision do United take with their centre forward.
Yeah.
Do they go and spend 120 million on 100 million on Harry Kane or 130 million on Victor Osimhen? How much budget is left?
Yeah.
What is the age profile of Harry Kane versus Victor Osimhen? So then that probably dictates which area you go to next in the profile of that player that you go and bring in. Because you don't want to bring in, say, 4 22-year-old players in one summer. Really.
No.
As much as you do that on Football Manager.
Exactly.
That's not the real world, right?
No, that's not the real world unless you are Chelsea. So, like,
of course, I forgot.
There are clubs that do it, and there are ownerships that like to go that way. And I think, if you look at someone like, again, let's say, look at Brighton have gone that way of shopping in different marketplaces to create a really good football team. But Man United can't do it exactly like that because they're Man United. You're not going to get away with that and let a McAllister be a 3-year development project. It doesn't work like that at Manchester United. So you definitely need youth. You definitely need to be able to have some players that you can develop. It kind of reminds me a little bit, Scott, about when making these choices, a bit when United signed Cristiano Ronaldo. People forget that when we signed Ronaldo, he was nowhere near first choice, And it did take him probably 2 or 3 years to become relevant, really. Like, he was a good young talent. United aren't there. We can't do that anymore. If we want to be top 4 and a title challenger, you can have youth, but I would stick with the youth you've got because it's really good. So someone like Manu,
just give some background on Manu.
I think
for anyone who's not sure.
Okay, with Kobe Manu,
where would he fit?
He is, I think, going to become one of the best box-to-box midfielders in the Premier League. I really do believe that. He's got incredible control of his own game. So when the ball is on the deck, he's got vision and he knows how to make the ball move from A to B to C without a lot of fuss. So in some ways, there's a little bit of Pogba about him, but he's not Pogba. He's not that type of player. He's not kind of silky skills. What he's got great engine, Scott. Yeah. And he's a great decision maker. He can score goals. He can push towards the 10. He can be the 8. He can even give you a lot of value in the 6. So he's that kind of player that I think that being a young, energetic player and kind of Manchester kind of bred behind the scenes, someone here bred for greatness, is that you can go with him in the same way that you've gone with Garnacho. So next year, give him significant minutes, but not worry too much about the end product. Like he's just going to give you extra minutes. And I actually think that Zidane Iqbal is not a million miles away from that either. I don't think he's nearly as good as Manu, but Zidane Iqbal, again, a metronomic talent who's really good, get the ball in the deck and has tons of time, Scott. That's the kind of midfielder I want, Scott. I don't want all this rushing rubbish that Fred gives me. Yeah, I want midfielders that put their foot on the ball, look up and can see the game. So Manu and Iqbal, for me, both young players, I think they're going to get minutes next year. Hannibal, when you think about it, and what he's done kind of at Birmingham and away from Man United, I think he needed those minutes this year desperately because he wasn't making the breakthrough. I'm not saying he's the grade we need, but again, I think he will probably come back into the squad with Ahmad. So that's 4 youngsters we've talked about. And you're talking about Garnacho, that's 5. So that's a lot, isn't it, to soak into your squad when you want to be a title contender. So that's why I'm saying maybe going out and buying 21, 22-year-olds is not exactly the ticket that Man United need at this moment of time.
Man United's website describes Kobe Manu as creatively outstanding Stockport-born midfielder. He's just turned 18 last month. Zidane Iqbal is 20.
Yeah.
I think, and you also saw, I'm sure you would have seen it if you were on social around the time that United won the Carabao Cup, but actually Manu was on the pitch with Erik ten Hag. Erik ten Hag had his arm around him and he was pointing to the crowd and essentially saying, I'm guessing that he said, look, this is what you can achieve if you stay on the right path. And do you see that when Garnacho signed his new contract last week, did you see Ten Hag's speech to his family?
Oh no! What did he say? I didn't know exactly. What was the?
It was essentially the same thing. Like you should go and look it up. And if you haven't already, if you're listening, just go and look it up. It's United released it on their channels. It was like a day in the life of Garnacho as he goes and re-signs his new deal at home with his family, going into United to sign the deal. Erik ten Hag then sits his entire family down. There's about 5-6 of them, and talks about how he just needs to stay on the straight and narrow, stay on the right path, continue to focus on his game. This contract is a reward for what he's done so far, but a push to the next thing. I thought it was quite pure, actually. It was a good piece of management for Erik ten Hag and Garnacho, we should hopefully see back soon. But that's the midfield done. Let us know. Is there a preference that you have? How many midfielders, if you're listening to this, do you think United need to sign in the summer? Given they do have options coming through. Let us know.
And the thing is, sorry to jump in, Scott. And the thing is, if you go with Manu next year in the same way that you had faith in Garnacho this season, you probably don't need to. So this is the point. So this is the way I look at it, is that I always think that you should give youth a chance and believe in youth. But there are times when, you do need to just go and sort your stuff out. You know what you need. You need to go and fill those skill gaps. But someone like Manu, and look, we love a local boy as well. Like I know, a lot of Man United fans maybe watching this don't care about those kind of things, but I know I do, and I know a lot of Man United fans do. And that is that Kobe being a local lad, like Marcus, you want to see them succeed. You want to give them that extra power, in the football club. And I think Manu will prove it on the pitch. That's the way I feel. It won't be like, oh well, he's just a kind of extra piece that you put in, and because he's a local lad and all that. No, I think people are going to be saying, I would love Kobe Manu at my football club. In the same way, I think a lot of people say about Garnacho. A lot of teams now go, we missed a trick with Garnacho. We could have got him from Atletico Madrid, but United did. So I'm with you on that. I think we said about Ten Hag, what he said there. I think you have to sell the allure of Manchester United as a football club to youngsters. You have to say, this is what we have done at this football club for 50, 60 years of promoting youth and living and dying by that and having success. Kobe Manu knows what it's like. He's a Man United fan. He wants to be there. And I think you could sit with him. Maybe Zidane's the one that goes out on loan then. Maybe he takes the Hannibal route to go and get a year of championship football. Look what it's done for Ahmed. Ahmed's been brilliant this season. I'm sure he'll come back to Manchester United a more complete footballer.
Let's move to the back. Goalkeeper. Now,
your favourite.
David De Gea is I think his terms are basically agreed on the new deal. I think this is a case of it's funny actually that it's been pushed through in the days after he's made another mistake to let a goal in. But anyway,
unfortunate timing.
David De Gea, he's going to resign. There's been some details released about the terms of the contract based on appearance bonuses and this kind of thing, and like the sticking point has always been David De Gea is on a massive wage. We can't afford to pay this anymore. Your squad status needs to align with your earning. And there's been suggestions, and this has softened my stance a little bit. There's been some suggestions that De Gea is not always viewed as is not going to be the long-term number one.
No,
I would maybe do the decision a little bit sooner. So I know I'll ask you a question in a bit, Rob, about how they build this position for now and for the years to come, or for next season and for the years to come. But De Gea will resign. That announcement will come in the next few weeks. It's quite, I think, from what I understand, it's quite imminent. And probably it's more a case of United need to release it as a positive time after a good performance, rather than after he's just made a mistake. I think it's.
I would say so.
I think we're going down into that deep into it.
Yeah.
But obviously, United have Dean Henderson, who I think we both agree. Try and sell him, right? You could probably raise some money for him that you can reinvest. They have other options as well. So what do they do? If David De Gea resigns, if Tom Heaton retires, or if he leaves, Jack Butland's going to leave as well on loan. He came in on loan, didn't he? He's probably going to leave as well. United need options in goal. So what do they do? We've spoken on this podcast about, do they go and sign Porto's Diogo Costa? Do they go and sign David Raya from Brentford, who's going to cost 20 to 30 mil in the last year of his contract, unless Brentford are going to be very painful about it and demand 40 million? They could, but we'll see. There's other options. Do United go down the route of a Jan Sommer from Bayern Munich, who is joined Bayern Munich for a few months because Manuel Neuer broke his leg, and now he's going to be firmly number 2, or he's going to be out of the club in the summer? Do United do two options like that, or do they go down the route of youth? And we reported on 90min.com earlier this week of United's young goalkeeper, Mateo Kovacic, who is playing for Sparta Prague currently and having a really good breakout season for them. He's a United youth product, joined them a number of years ago, counts as homegrown now, I believe, and I think he's 22 now, so he could potentially come into the mix. United have always made clear that they'd like to promote youth. For me, I would be more comfortable as a number 3, personally. I think it's a bit too much of a step up. But Rob, what in your ideal world here? I know what you're going to say. What would you do?
Do you know what I'm going to say? I'm going to see. Let's see if you do know what I'm going to say. Okay, so some of this, we talk about all these transfers here. This is exactly what transfer business is. It's kind of like a big lump of clay that you have to shape, and you look at the kind of finances and try to put all these things together because they all are interconnected. So the goalkeeper situation, we know that David De Gea is going to get his contract. We knew this for a long time ago. I think the wider debate on De Gea was, would he be guaranteed the number 1 spot? So this is what he was pushing with Ten Hag in the management, is that if he stays at Manchester United, yes, it will be on reduced terms. Yes, there'll be all sorts of weird bonuses kind of in there to kind of spread the deal out and to make the deal more appealing both to Manchester United and to David De Gea in many ways. But the big stickling point, I think, for you, Scott, and for many Man United fans, is that if De Gea is your number 1 next season, you're stuffed. You're not going to have a title challenge. There's going to be a big part of it. So what would I do? So you just spoke about Kovacic there. And the thing is with him is that I think he's ready to be part of the Man United squad. And I would be more than happy for him to be the number 2. So the way I look at it is this, is that to be the number 1 at Manchester United, you do need a certain amount of experience and acumen. However, I spoke to you off camera about this, and I actually said it on the show before. It talked about when De Gea came from Atletico Madrid, and I wrote a story on it back then. And I said United should gamble on this 18-year-old because he's that good, but it's going to take a year or two. Now, just like we just said there about a young player in midfield, Man United haven't really got a year or two to develop players. It's just not the truth, and certainly not a goalkeeper. And you don't want to kill a goalkeeper at the Premier League now, do you? So Kova's the number 2. De Gea would be the number 1. But I would also quite like, if it's available and on the table, that Man United go and sign David Raya. 25 million.
I told you I knew what you
Yeah,
were going to say.
I know it's boring now. I had to build it up, didn't I? But the whole thing with Raya is it's like the Kim situation, is that you will not get a goalkeeper of that experience and that skill set for 25 million on the last year of his contract at Brentford at any point in the future. And if you go and sign Costa, who I think is kind of on par with Raya, people might think he's better in terms of, generational talent as a goalkeeper, and people talk about him being the modern sweeper keeper and everything. I don't think that if you don't want to spend 60 million because you're just giving De Gea a new contract, you could spend 25 million on Raya and then have Raya have the young lad come back then as the 3, and then they fight it out between them. Now,
is that a healthy situation?
I don't know if that always works.
About Dean Henderson, didn't we?
If Dean Henderson had a different kind of personality and attitude, and if Dean Henderson had played better when he had his minutes, Dean Henderson would be the number 1 today. That's it. It's finished. It's on Dean Henderson. It's not on anyone else. It's not on Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. It's on Dino. So it's up to him. He should have played better, and he wasn't better. So that's just the way it goes. So that's why De Gea has prevailed. So like De Gea is almost like the great survivor in all of this, because he has so many people knocking him, and yet he's still there. And yeah, he does make mistakes, and he's not very good with his feet, and he's still there. The manager still wants him. So you can solve this with a halfway house, Scott. And that is, you can even then let Kova go back out on loan for another year if you wanted to keep getting him the minutes as a 22-year-old and then 23 next year. Bring in Raya, and you say to David De Gea, you are not automatic. You are not automatic. The best goalkeeper will play. And then it's up to Raya to displace him. But would Raya want to do that? That's another thing. So Raya could go pretty much anywhere and be first choice. He will do. There's going to be a ton of clubs that want him. Might even opt to stay at Brentford for a little bit longer.
Chelsea, Brentford.
So many clubs that are looking for their next kind of sweeper keeper, that kind of player that adds so much value. And I think Raya does. I think he's an incredible goalkeeper. So I'd like Raya at Man United for 25 million, and that's kind of where I leave it. I think if you could go get him, whatever you're doing with David De Gea shouldn't really impact that, because you do need more than one player for each position who is a potential starter. And I don't mind Kovar being the second choice if he genuinely is going to sit on the bench. But that would then mean that David De Gea is absolutely your bona fide number 1 and has no real kind of contention there.
You just mentioned things you need, and what United need on Saturday is 3 points. So let's talk about Wolves, because as we alluded to earlier in the show, this is never an easy game. Remember, I think it was in about, I want to say 2021 in January, like a cold January night. And it was going to a 0-0. And then Marcus Rashford came up and scored in the 90th minute, 93rd minute. I think it was deflected, and everyone went mad. And it was like, oh, we're in a title race here. It was actually we were actually at that point. I can't remember. Maybe the year is off. I can't remember. But I'm sure you remember it if you remember the feeling you had at that time. Wolves always difficult. It was actually Marcus Rashford in the reverse fixture that scored in the second half. I believe it was a good piece of individual skill to force the win there. Wolves are a good team now. I know they've been languishing for most of the season, but they do have an experienced European coach who's managed in premium competitions, managed in La Liga, managed in big clubs, managed Real Madrid. And they've turned things around. They're out of danger now. They can come in without pressure. The pressure's on United this time.
Yeah, I mean, these 4 games that United got, the pressure is all on Man United and no one else. So you're going to have to handle that. You said last week, Scott, that these players don't handle pressure very well. Well, they're going to have to.
Now. It's a good test.
This is the ultimate test. Yeah, these 4 games against 4 clubs you should beat. But we probably feel that United will drop points. When you look at this Wolves game, I think what Lopetegui has done with Wolves is that he's kind of put the kind of nuts and bolts together to be better next season. And I think Wolves could be your kind of Brighton type team next season in terms of like consistency and kind of the effectiveness of their own game. But I think when you look at this match, you just say, "Ned." I remember like Traore. Every time we played Traore, he would be like just fantastic and skin your fullback, and it would look horrible. Thankfully, at the moment, Traore is not getting games because he doesn't really fit Lopetegui's system. So we might not have to deal with that pace. But they've got it more together, Wolves, in the sense of how their open play plays. And I think they'll come to Man United and they'll enjoy the task. I think they'll come to Old Trafford and they'll realise that they can kind of have their day at Old Trafford. And I think all the remaining 3 teams coming to United in the next few weeks will do that. And United need to be bigger than that moment. So tough game for United, but it's about just getting it done. 1-0 is good enough, Scott. You don't need to be the best in the world. You really don't. You just need to make sure that the fundamental parts of your team are working from back to front. And there are worries, but I'm sure you're worried about De Gea's hands, at the moment, and his feet. People are worried about Lindelof again. Will Varane kind of come back sooner rather than later?
Will Harry Maguire come back?
There's the Maguire question now. Do you bring him back in so you can put Luke Shaw back on the left? The midfield is a little bit brittle, like saying the worst form of the season for both Casemiro and for Eriksen. And then, what do you do up top? Is it Weghorst? Is it Martial? Is it Rashford? So there's a lot of stuff there to unpack that you can almost do like 3-hour show on, but it's the same stuff. So that's the worry, isn't it? Is that if those things repeat, those problems in all those areas, there's every chance that this does not end up as a victory for Manchester United. However, if they have a good day, Scott, at the office, they might go out there and actually do the job quickly. Like I will be at the game, obviously, and I want to see Man United take care of business in 20 minutes. First 20 minutes, 3 goals, bury the game, bury Wolves, and let them go back in at half-time thinking, well, this game is over and we're going to go on holiday quite soon. So that's what Man United need to do in these games, Scott. Being honest, do I think they'll do that? Not at all. They'll do it the hard way because they always do.
Well, they've already started doing it the hard way, haven't they? It would even go this far, and to me, I would say if they won this game and put in a decent performance, 2-0, whatever, I would even go into the Bournemouth game thinking United should win this, and they could even have it wrapped up before the final day of the season. And that's what should happen.
That's what serious football clubs do. Like serious football clubs who want to win do it exactly like that. You don't use all the games, and this was always the issue with Man United. And when Man United fans were saying, "Oh, top 4 is easy, guaranteed," it's not guaranteed because this football club shows that it always takes the longest distance to get to wherever it wants to be. Generally, do you know what I mean? So, Man United, let's hope that they can get the 9 points out of 9, and then the final game in the season against Fulham is just a day in the sun at Old Trafford. I'll be there with my feet up on my seat, watching it all going. We're in the top 4. I don't have to worry about Liverpool. Neither does any of these other 78,000 people. And the job is done. You can get on with the summer. And that's kind of where I want to be. But United have to prove it. And I do think it will probably go to the final game just because of the way Man United are. We're still dysfunctional and we're still not killers. And we need to be away from that kind of mindset of where we take so long to achieve our objectives.
Get your predictions in. Will United do it? We'll see. 3 p.m. UK time on Saturday. Very rare for United this season. They always play on Thursday night, so it's a little bit weird not to see United on TV or not on TV on Sunday at 2 p.m. or 4:30 UK time. It's they're behind the football blackout this week.
That's it, and a week off, fatigue. So you've had time to rest now. Can these players do it in the next game? And we will see if it was fatigue or whether it's just something up here in terms of stability of their mentality. So I think it's probably a little bit of both, but I think it's more the latter. And you should not allow Wolves to take points of you at home at Old Trafford. And I'm sure Ten Hag will be telling his players all of this and saying, this is where you will get judged now. These 3 or 4 games will be what people talk about all summer long going into next season. And it will be the difference, Scott, between some of these players staying and some of these players going. If you can show Ten Hag in 4 games that you're a worthy part of this squad and you can get United to the Champions League, you might just earn some more money out of it.
If they do qualify for the Champions League, they do most of them get pay rises as well. So because they get deductions when they don't qualify. and raise.
And that's a big thing for players. It is like people don't talk about those things, but it's absolutely huge because, yeah, if your wage goes up 20%, it's not bad, is it? If you're already on 150, 200 a week, that's a lot of money. So there is that side of it as well. If you want to just be professional, go do the job and take the money home.
United should, the way they should approach this, try and forget about everything that's happened in recent games. Yeah. Their home form for the duration of the season has been, I'm touching wood here, has been good. The performance levels have been better than the away games. Get back to it. You've had a full week to prepare for this. No excuses now. And if there are excuses, or if there are, I called it, if they drop it from here, I called it pathetic. It would be a pathetic.
It'd be a huge failure.
It'd be a massive failure.
If Liverpool end up 4th and we end up 5th, it would be as catastrophic as you could express for Ten Hag in year one after such an amazing, 11 months up to this point or whatever, that you've got this far and you've done. And the funny thing is, Scott, like we said at the top of the show, it doesn't mean that you won't be title challengers next year. You just didn't have to go and do the business, but then it's difficult because you're outside the Champions League. So the Champions League is the golden goose. You need to be in it to attract a certain amount of talent. You're not getting Kim probably if you're playing in Europa next year. He's going to stay at Napoli and play Champions League football and try and win it. So you've got to at least be able to put that on the table for a certain caliber of player. Kovacic, you might be able to get for 30 million if you're in the Europa, but you're not going to get Kim and you're not going to get that next level of elite footballer. That's also why Frankie de Jong also wasn't particularly interested this season.
Can I ask you one more question on coming back to goalkeepers?
Yeah.
I'm going to throw a name at you. I want your reaction. Emi Martinez.
No.
There you go. Right.
This is where I won't cut my nose off to spite my face about De Gea, because I know De Gea's got all these issues, but it's about if a goalkeeper comes in, you have to say, is that goalkeeper better than that goalkeeper? Is he? And yeah, Martinez has got certain attributes. Oh my God, no, just no, thank you. I don't want him at Man United. I would have David De Gea every day of the week over Martinez.
I would too, to be fair. Don't do it. I've seen some speculation there.
But Jordan Pickford, yes or no?
Jordan Pickford, no.
No.
I wouldn't do it.
And that's where we're going. All these goalkeepers are going to get debated now, and we'll do it on the show, no doubt, in the weeks to come. But Jordan Pickford might be about to leave Everton, and yeah, he's a good goalkeeper. Is he a top 4 goalkeeper, or is he a championship winning goalkeeper? Absolutely not. I don't care if he's England's number 1 and played in World Cups. He's not of that caliber.
Be anymore anyway.
Martinez just won a World Cup, didn't he? And I still wouldn't have him at Man United as Man United's goalkeeper. And I still think David De Gea is better than both those two goalkeepers.
That's it for us. We'll wrap it there. Hopefully you have enjoyed. How do we describe these shows? Therapy? I don't know. A bit more of a
turn it a bit like that, doesn't it?
Catharsis. I don't know.
Look, we're both passionate Man United fans, right? We are. We work in the industry and we're passionate fans and we go to games. And ultimately, we feel everything that everyone else feels. We really, really do. I'll be at Old Trafford tomorrow and I will be jittery and thinking this is kind of last chance saloon for my football club. But at the same time, Scott, we don't have to shout and scream about absolutely everything like we do every now and then. And if you could hear our conversations off camera, you would hear some expletives, especially from my filthy mouth sometimes. But ultimately, we feel these things, don't we? We want Man United to win and we want success just like everyone else. So yeah, I think the shows are a little bit like therapy, but we try and talk through things with a little bit more of calm.
We will discuss the ownership situation, as I suggested on previous shows, when we have something concrete, because we don't.
It's coming.
We're expecting it soon, but we've been expecting it soon for a long time. But we'll see when a decision is made, something concrete comes through, then we'll discuss it rather than ifs, buts, and maybes, which is just doing my head in personally.
Yeah, I tweeted this as well, Scott. As I said, stop listening to people. Yeah, wait for the announcements and then we can talk about facts rather than fan fiction, because this is what we're getting from a lot of quarters now. And I will say this, it's up to the fan channels now to hold their own standards higher as well, to make sure that they are the voice for the fans as opposed to the voice for themselves.
Subscribe to our show wherever you get your podcasts. Give us a 5-star review on Apple, Google, Spotify, whatever you can. Support the show, please. We'd love that. Follow us on Twitter too, @_Scott Saunders, @_Rob_B. and at Promised Land MU for the show. We're on YouTube. Like, subscribe. Please subscribe. We're nearing a milestone. If you haven't already, leave a comment for us. I've asked you a bunch of questions today. If you got through to the end of the show, who do you want in midfield, etc., etc. Get in touch. We love hearing your thoughts. We do read everything, and we'll one day we'll work out a time to do another comment show. When maybe in the next few weeks. We'll
soon.
See. But
yeah,
soon.
we'll
do it soon. Head over to the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment for us. And as for today's show, that's the end. So thanks, Rob, again. I've been Scott Saunders. Thanks, everyone. See you soon. Hopefully, Man United can take a step closer to reaching the Champions League by the next time we talk. But I don't have much faith. So fingers crossed, eh?